Moving on to McLaren.
Hmm.
Fantastic weekend for McLaren, depending on what side of the garage you're on. Um, Not as controversial as last year, thankfully. Obviously, Lando Norris finished first from Oscar Piastri, and I suppose we'll talk about both of them in the same breath. Lando's first lap was, or well, his start was okay, and then he got pinched out by Oscar. Nothing illegal, nothing wrong with it. Oscar was well within his rights. He didn't run him off the track. Lando just kind of committed to his line. Oscar saw him and decided to defend against him, which cost Lando a lot of places. Drops to fifth, recovers, and gets put onto the one-stop strategy. So lots of people, there's a particular channel who tried to over dramatize this, saying that, oh my God, McLaren are favoring Lando. How could they not put Oscar on the one stop? And this is awful. It's so unfair. It's British bias. Blah blah blah. Come on.
No,
What did you make of the strategy?
I think it wasn't necessarily just. I don't think it was a strategy that done this. I think it was Lando. I think the strategy wouldn't have worked without Lando doing what he did and managing to be that tire whisperer and just being able to get into that window with that window. And we talk about that a lot in Formula One. You hear it a lot, getting into that window, getting into the zone. It just clicked for him. Everything worked, conditions, tires, the way he was driving. Other than the first lap, he didn't put a foot wrong at all. The first lap's always been a bit of a slight weak spot for him. And this wasn't necessarily, as you've touched on already, it wasn't really his fault. It was just a circumstance. It's a very narrow first corner, and he committed to a bit. Piastri did exactly what any other driver would do, just narrowed the corner, shut the door a wee bit, not violently, but just enough. And unfortunately, because he had to lift off the throttle, other folk were on the throttle, lost a couple of spots, and he recovered. Uh, it's the drive that I think a lot of people, if you're a Formula One fan, but mostly McLaren, that you've always really wanted and expected them to do, and it just
Mm.
never quite came off. Like there would always be a slight error somewhere, or something that would put him on the back foot, or and it just clicked for him, and it just worked, and it was really really nice to see. And I still think it's Piastri's championship. I don't think he's quite turned that narrative, but it's not going to take much more. If he does another similar drive at Zandvoort, then you're going to start thinking this is going to get tasty.
Mhm. It's a 14-point swing in his favor, having won the race versus finishing second.
Yeah,
As in he's closed the gap by 7 points rather than it being extended by 7 points. So it is a 14-point swing by finishing ahead of Oscar.
yeah, because he's nine
But
points behind, or he
nine
would
points
have been
behind now.
20. He would have ended up 22 behind, and that's big. The
That
20,
is big with not with 10 races to go. Yeah.
yeah, 22 is a race win effectively, and all Piastri needs to do is stay with him. He
Yeah.
doesn't even need to win everything. When you're 22 points ahead, we
Mhm.
tend to go. Uh, but when it's nine between them, that's very
No,
different.
nine
That,
if
that,
Lando if it's a 1-2 in Lando's favor again in Zandvoort, which if last year's form is anything to go on, it might be.
hmm
29 seconds he ran away with it last year, and the McLaren was not a dominant car yet back then. Um, then it's a 2-point championship, and Oscar Piastri must be starting to get quite happy with that gap that there's no point for fastest lap this year.
Yes.
Because he could, like Lando could easily narrow it down to 8 points to 1 point in Zandvoort if there was still a point for fastest lap, but there isn't. No, it was a really really good race, and I think this is where obviously this is where the intrigue came from. If you're a Formula One fan and you've seen Hungary before. When I was at the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2019, which is the race when Max pitted 20 laps early. Lewis was on a one stop. Max pitted with 20 laps to go and chased him for 20 laps and passed him with like a lap to go. Um, there was nothing else going on in that race at all. I remember absolutely nothing at all of that entire race. I remember more of the support races, but I vividly remember Max chasing Lewis and having two phones out and timing the two of them as they passed past the start the point in front of us to see who was getting close, and everyone around me was getting mad into it, going, "He's 10 seconds, he's 9 seconds, he's 8 seconds," and that was exactly what this felt like.
hmm
Um, and as you said, what Lando needed to do was tire whisper. He did get helped by traffic as much as he said it was going to screw him. Um, but I don't think that counts as him being gifted a win. I don't think he was gifted
Mm-mm.
a win. I think he really
No.
had to work for it.
Oh yeah.
That was not a guaranteed win. Oscar, I saw the graph of how quickly Oscar closed him down. Oscar won that race by everything except finishing over the line first.
Yeah. And sometimes in Formula One, it's not always about luck. It's being in the right place at the right time, and there's always these wee variables, and the like we talked about the Japanese Grand Prix earlier on in the season. With the new surface, it took away the variable about tyre wear, so
Hmm.
that's why it ended up being one of those rare Japanese Grand Prix that was really boring. So the variables you had there was just it was all the variables kind of fell in Lando's favour, and then everything was timed pretty much perfect. I think back in the day they said if you run out of fuel on your in lap from qualifying, because remember that it was like an hour, you went out, done a fast lap, you came back in. If you ran out of fuel on the third lap, then they've put exactly the amount of fuel they need in the car because weight was bigger and it was a bigger issue back then than it was now. Uh, it's a similar thing. They timed it absolutely spot on because
Hmm.
two more laps, Piastri's passing Norris.
100%.
Uh,
He did 39 laps on those tires, on those hard tires. And it was mo even though it wasn't the step difference that we had in Belgium, the pace offset between the mediums and the hards in Hungary was absolutely massive. And Piastri was a second a lap quicker than him for 15 laps as he caught him up. Like I said, they hit traffic then, and what hurt Lando hurt Norris. What hurt Lando hurt Piastri as well. The back markers, to their credit, didn't hold anybody up. So it
hmm,
wasn't a case of, oh, Lando always found them down the back straight and Oscar got held up in the corners. They were equally held up or not held up. So even that was perfectly fair, but there was none of this. Oh, McLaren gave him the favorite strategy. It wasn't. It was not the favorite strategy. Now, he's not the only one who did it. Plenty of drivers did the one stop, but Pirelli reckoned it was like 18 seconds slower. And yeah, if they hadn't hit traffic, there's a very good chance Lando finishes 18 seconds behind Oscar in that race.
hmm.
Lando didn't switch onto the hards thinking, "Oh yeah, put me on the hards and I'll win this race." He's like, "Put me on the hards so like I can recover back to the podium," is what he was thinking.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, there was discussions whether that was the full discussions, because as we know, we hear select radio during the
Mhm.
race. But, there was discussions about, do we do this pit stop to cover this? Do we do this to do that? And like I say, I don't think it's overly deep for us to discuss because I just think it just clicked. It's just one of those things. It's like you've watched football in your life, and same with rugby. Sometimes in games like that, your team just clicks. There's no real
Mhm.
understanding. It just works,
Just
and
worked, yeah.
you come away with like in soccer like a 3-0 win, or your rugby team's 4 or 5 tries ahead of the opposition, and you can't quite place why. It's the same
Mhm.
folk, it's the same tactics. It just works. Everything you've tried in 4 or 5 games, it maybe not quite have worked.
Mhm.
Maybe the pass didn't thingy, or you hit the bar, or whatever, or you were offside. Everything just fell, and the
And
striker scored every goal. And it's the same for Norris at Hungary.
and everything worked for Piastri as well. It just worked a little bit better for Lando in this particular. They set two identical pit stops to set the fastest pit stop of the year twice.
Yeah,
Both
1.9
drivers,
seconds.
1.94 seconds, both of them. Lando's one stop and Oscar's second stop were both 1.94 seconds. So, and Oscar's first stop was like 2 seconds. So, even the pit crew were on total form. It
Hmm.
wasn't that, oh, Lando got so lucky because Oscar got held up in the pits. He didn't. Nothing from a
No,
purely strategic point of view. Nothing at all went wrong or was hampered in Oscar Piastri's race. It just went a little bit better for Lando this time around. And to be fair, Oscar obviously was a bit disappointed to not win the race. He's a racer. He wants to win the championship. He wants to beat his teammate every week. He wants to win races. But he didn't get out of the car and throw a feckin' hissy fit, as he would have done if he had been put on a worse strategy and Lando had been favored to get the win from fifth. It's not what happened.